Alright, original tales short story for you. In this one, it gets messy fast. Let's get into it.
My wealthy grandmother saw me and my 6-year-old daughter at a family shelter. She asked, "Why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" I was stunned. What house? 3 days later, I arrived at a family event, and my parents went pale. If you've never tried to get a 6-year-old ready for school while living in a family shelter, I can summarize the experience for you. It's like running a small airport. Except the passengers are emotional, the security line is shame, and you're doing it all with one sock missing. That morning, Lila's sock was the one missing. "Mom," she whispered, the way kids do when they're trying to help you not fall apart. "It's okay. I can wear different socks." She held up one pink sock with a unicorn and one white sock that used to be white. I stared at them like they were evidence in a crime scene. "It's a bold fashion choice," I said. I do what I want." Lila smiled, and just like that, for half a second, I forgot where we were. Then the shelter door opened behind us, and the cold slapped me back into reality. We were outside St. Brigid Family Shelter, 6:12 a.m., the sky still a bruised gray. The sidewalk was damp. The air had that winter smell, metallic and clean, like the world had been scrubbed too hard. Lila adjusted her backpack, which was bigger than she was. I tugged the zipper up on her puffy coat and tried not to look at the sign above the entrance. Family shelter. It wasn't even the word shelter that got me. It was the word family. Like we were a category, like we were a label on a box. "Okay," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "School bus in 5 minutes." Lila nodded. She was brave in a quiet way that made me feel both proud and guilty at the same time. Then she asked softly, "Do I still have to say my address when Mrs. Cole asks?" My stomach clenched. "I don't think she'll ask today," I said. Lila didn't push. She just looked down at her shoes and then back up at me like she was memorizing my face, like she was checking if I was still me. "Mom," she said, "are we going to move again?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. And that's when a black sedan slid to the curb like it belonged there. Not a taxi, not an Uber, not the kind of car that ever pulled up to St. Brigid unless it took a wrong turn and regretted it. The door opened, and a woman stepped out in a tailored coat the color of midnight. Evelyn Hart, my grandmother. I hadn't seen her in over a year. I knew that because my life had been measured in before everything fell apart, and after. And she belonged firmly in before. She looked exactly the way she always did, composed, elegant, and slightly terrifying. Not in a cruel way, in an "I once ended a boardroom argument by raising one eyebrow" way. Her gaze landed on me first, and I saw recognition, then confusion. Then it landed on Lila. Something changed in her face, something quick and sharp, like a crack in glass. She looked up at the sign above the entrance, and then she looked back at me. "Maya," she said, and my name sounded strange in her voice, like she hadn't said it out loud in a long time. "What are you doing here?" My first instinct was to lie, not because I thought she'd judge me, because I couldn't stand being seen. "I'm fine," I said, which is the default lie of exhausted women everywhere. "We're okay. It's temporary." Evelyn's eyes flicked down to Lila's mismatched socks, and then to my hands, red and dry from too much sanitizer, too much cold, too much life. Her voice went quieter. "Maya," she said again, "why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" The world tilted. I blinked at her. "My what?" She didn't repeat herself like she thought I was stupid. She repeated herself like she thought I might faint. "The house," she said, enunciating the words. "On Hawthorne Street." My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What house?" I heard myself say. I don't have a house. Evelyn stared at me as if I'd spoken in another language. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was running numbers in her head. Timelines. Possibilities. Lies. Lila tugged my sleeve. Mom, she whispered. Do we have a house? I looked down at her. Her eyes were wide, hopeful in a way that hurt. I swallowed. No, honey, I said gently. We don't. Evelyn's face went very still. And when my grandmother went still, it usually meant something was about to break. She stepped closer, not to me, toward Lila. She crouched down in front of her, which was almost shocking. Evelyn Hart did not crouch for anyone. She sat in chairs that cost more than my monthly income and made everyone else adjust. But there she was, lowering herself to my daughter's height. You're Lila, right? She asked. Yes, Lila whispered shyly. Evelyn's expression softened just slightly. That's a beautiful name. Then her eyes lifted to mine and turned sharp again. Get in the car, she said. I blinked. Grandma, get in the car, she repeated, and there was no room in her tone for negotiation. I felt heat rush to my face. Anger, embarrassment, relief, everything tangled up. Evelyn opened the back door of the sedan. I hesitated. Lila looked up at me. Mom, she said, small and steady. It's okay. And the fact that my 6-year-old was comforting me was the final straw. I nodded. Okay. Lila climbed into the back seat first, clutching her backpack, and I slid in beside her, still half expecting someone to tap me on the shoulder and tell me this was a misunderstanding. As soon as the door shut, the silence inside felt expensive. Evelyn didn't drive immediately. She just sat there with both hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Then she spoke, very calmly. By tonight, she said, I will know who did this. My stomach flipped. She turned her head to look at me. I swallowed hard. Grandma, I don't understand. No, she said, you don't. And that tells me everything. She pulled out her phone, tapped once, and said, Call Adam. A man answered quickly. Ms. Hart. This is Evelyn, she said. Get the property manager for Hawthorne Street on the line. And I want a simple answer. Who has the keys, who is living there, and whether anyone has been collecting money off it. My blood ran cold. Money? I stared at her profile, at the set of her jaw, at the calm way she said those words like she was ordering coffee. And I realized I was not just embarrassed. I was standing on the edge of something much darker. If you'd asked me 6 months earlier if I thought I'd ever be living in a shelter with my daughter, I would have laughed. Not because I thought it couldn't happen, because I thought it couldn't happen to me. That's a dangerous kind of arrogance, by the way. It doesn't protect you. It just makes the fall louder. 6 months earlier, I was still working as a nursing assistant at St. Jude's Medical Center. 12-hour shifts, call lights going off like a slot machine, people asking me for things I didn't have. Time, answers, miracles. I was exhausted, but I was surviving. And then I moved in with my parents. It was supposed to be temporary. It always starts with temporary. My dad, Robert, had that calm, reasonable voice that people believe. My mom, Diane, had that soft smile that made her sound like she was doing you a favor, even when she was cutting you off at the knees. These days, I call them by their first names. Mom and Dad didn't fit anymore. You can stay with us until you get back on your feet, Diane said. Lila needs stability. Family supports family. I should have heard the fine print hiding in that sentence, but I didn't. At first, it was tolerable. My parents' apartment was small, but we made it work. Lila slept in my old room. I worked, I paid what I could, I kept my head down. Then the comments started. Not big, obvious attacks. Little ones. The kind that don't look like cruelty if you tell someone about them later. You're always tired, Diane would say. Maybe you should organize your life better. Robert would sigh when Lila's toys were on the floor. We're just trying to keep the place nice. And then, one night, after I'd come home from a double shift with my feet aching and my brain half dead, Diane sat down at the kitchen table like she was about to deliver a diagnosis. We need to talk, she said. I already knew that tone. We think it's time you became independent, she said softly. You've been here long enough. I'm trying, I said, keeping my voice even. Rents are high. Deposits. You're a mother, Diane said. If you're a good mother, you'll figure it out. The words hit me so hard I actually looked around, like someone else must have said them. Robert cleared his throat. 30 days. That's reasonable. We're not monsters. I wanted to scream, but screaming never helped in that apartment. It just gave them something to point at later. So I nodded. Okay. And I tried. I looked at listings during my breaks at the hospital, my thumbs scrolling while I gulped cafeteria coffee. I called places. I got told the same thing over and over. First and last month. Deposit. Proof of income. Credit check. Sorry, we chose another applicant. Every day I felt like I was running uphill with Lila on my back. And then came the night they decided 30 days was actually a suggestion. It was after a late shift. I'd helped a confused elderly man back into bed 3 times, cleaned up a spilled tray, and held a woman's hand while she cried because she was scared of surgery. I came home after midnight. The hallway light outside my parents' apartment was on. My stomach tightened immediately. 2 cardboard boxes sat outside the door. My boxes. I stared at them for a long second like my brain refused to accept the shape of what I was seeing. Then I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again. Harder. Finally, the door cracked open. Diane's face appeared, calm as if this was a normal Tuesday. You need to keep your voice down, she whispered sharply. Neighbors. Why are my things outside? I demanded. Robert's voice came from behind her, bored. We told you, Maya. Independence. It hasn't been 30 days, I said, my voice shaking. Diane's expression hardened just slightly. Plans change. I glanced past her shoulder into the entryway. Lila was curled up on the floor right by the shoe rack, her little jacket folded under her head like a pillow, half asleep, shoes still on, like they'd put her there hours ago so I could scoop her up and disappear without waking the whole apartment. Where are we supposed to go? I hissed. Diane's smile came back, thin and satisfied. You'll figure it out. You always do. And then, as if she were doing me a favor, she added, Don't make a scene. I stood there with my boxes in the hallway, the air buzzing in my ears. I stepped inside just long enough to crouch and slide my arms under Lila. She made a tiny sleepy sound and automatically wrapped herself around my neck. As I backed out into the hall, Diane's hand was already on the door. The door closed. Lila stirred. Mom? She mumbled. It's okay, I lied automatically. We're having a sleepover. I shoved the boxes into my car and drove. I don't remember most of that night. I remember streetlights. I remember the way my hands shook on the steering wheel. I remember sitting in the car with Lila asleep across the back seat, her small body curled like a question mark. I remember thinking over and over, how did this happen? The next day, I tried to fix it. Because that's what I do. I fix things. I wipe down messes. I lift people who can't lift themselves. I called Diane. She didn't answer. I called Robert. He answered once. We're doing this because we love you, he said, like he was reading from a script. Tough love. Then he hung up. I went to work anyway, because the rent I didn't have wasn't going to pay itself. By day 3, my cheeks were hollow from stress and my stomach hurt from cheap gas station food. I tried a motel. 1 night. 2. Then the money ran out. A school counselor noticed Lila was quiet, asked if everything was okay. I lied. Then the counselor asked again, gently, and I saw Lila watching me with those big eyes, learning from me how to lie to survive. So I told the truth. And 2 days later, I was filling out shelter intake forms while Lila sat beside me swinging her legs. The intake worker was kind but tired, like she'd seen too much. "We need your information," she said. "We need to know where you stayed last night." "In my car," I said. She nodded like she was checking a box. Lila leaned toward me and whispered too loudly, "Is this our house now?" The woman flinched. I smiled too hard. "No," I said quickly. "No, sweetheart." I wanted to add, "This is temporary," but the word tasted like a joke. That night, Lila fell asleep on a narrow bed beside me in a room that smelled like bleach and overcooked food. I lay awake listening to the sounds of other families behind thin walls, coughing, babies crying, someone whispering, "It's okay," over and over like a prayer. My phone sat in my hand. I thought about calling my grandmother. Evelyn Hart was not the kind of woman you called to cry. She was the kind of woman you called when you needed a problem solved. But my mother had spent years training me not to bother her. "Your grandmother hates drama," Diane always said. "She doesn't like weakness. Don't embarrass yourself." And when I texted Diane after the lockout, asking if Evelyn knew what was happening, Diane responded instantly. "Grandma is overseas. She's busy. Don't drag her into this." It was incredible how fast my mother could answer a text when she wanted something. So I didn't call. I told myself I'd handle it. I told myself I didn't want to look pathetic. I told myself a lot of things. And then, on a cold winter morning, my grandmother stepped out of a black sedan outside a shelter and asked me why I wasn't living in my house on Hawthorne Street. And I realized I didn't just have a housing problem. I had a family problem, and someone had been lying for a long time. Back in the sedan, Evelyn's call was already in progress. I didn't hear the other voice, only Evelyn's side, sharp enough to cut glass. "Who signed for the keys?" A beat. "And the house is occupied." My stomach dropped. Evelyn didn't react like someone surprised. She reacted like someone confirming what she'd already suspected. "Send the file to Adam," she said. "Everything." She ended the call and finally looked at me, not with pity, with certainty. I sent one text to Lila's school with thumbs that wouldn't stop shaking. "Family emergency. Lila won't be in today. No explanation, no essay. Just the truth in the smallest, least humiliating package I could manage." Evelyn drove to a diner 10 minutes away, the kind of place with warm windows, a bell on the door, and menus that smelled like syrup. Inside, the heater blasted my face so hard I almost cried from the shock of being warm. We slid into a booth. Lila immediately found the kids' menu and started coloring a cartoon pancake like it had personally insulted her. Evelyn ordered hot chocolate for Lila without asking. I watched her do it and felt a weird wave of anger. Not at Evelyn, at the universe, because it was that easy to be kind, and my parents had chosen everything else. Evelyn lifted her phone again. "Grandma," I started, then stopped, because I had no idea what I was even asking. "What house? Why are you here? How did my life become a shelter sign?" Evelyn didn't answer my questions in the order my panic wanted. She just said calmly, "I'm going to make another call. You'll listen, and you won't interrupt." I nodded. It was the kind of nod you give a surgeon when you're on the operating table. She tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker. One ring. 2. Then my mother's voice. Diane. Bright and sweet, like she was auditioning for the role of loving parent in a community theater production. Evelyn! Oh my goodness! What a surprise! How are you? Evelyn's tone stayed pleasant, almost gentle. I was thinking about Maya, she said. How is she doing? I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. There was a microsecond of silence, the tiniest pause where a liar decides which version of reality is most useful. Then Diane answered smoothly, confidently, like she'd been practicing the sentence in front of a mirror. Oh, she's doing great, she said. She's living in the house. She's settled. She loves it. You know Maya. She wanted space, so we didn't bother you. I stared at the sticky table as if it might open up and swallow me whole. Across from me, Lila colored quietly, humming to herself. She didn't understand the words, but she understood tone. She glanced up once, saw my face, and went right back to coloring harder. Like she could scribble the problem away. Diane kept talking, filling the silence with cheerful nonsense. How busy she'd been, how proud she was, how family is everything. Evelyn let her. Evelyn didn't rush liars. She gave them room to hang themselves properly. Finally, Evelyn said, "That's good to hear," and ended the call. Just like that. No confrontation, no accusation, no gotcha. My throat tightened. That, Evelyn said quietly, wasn't confusion. I let out a laugh that sounded like a cough. So she knew, I said. She knew the whole time. Evelyn's eyes stayed on mine, steady and sharp. She knew enough to lie without thinking, she said. That tells me what I need to know. Lila slid her coloring page toward me. Mom, look. I made the pancake purple. I forced a smile so quickly it probably looked painful. Wow, I said. That pancake is incredibly brave. Lila giggled, and for half a second my chest unclenched. Then Evelyn leaned in, lowered her voice, and said the simple sentence I should have heard months ago. I arranged a house for you, she said, on Hawthorne Street. Your parents were supposed to manage the handoff. Keys, move in, all of it. They told me it was done. My brain tried to process it. A house. For us. And my parents had been living their lives like that sentence didn't exist. I gripped the edge of the booth until my knuckles went white. Why wouldn't you tell me directly? I heard myself ask, and immediately felt stupid, like I was blaming the only person who'd shown up. Evelyn didn't flinch. Because I trusted your parents, she said, which was my mistake. Not yours. Then she stood up, walked a few steps away so Lila couldn't hear, and made 2 quick calls. Low voice, clipped, efficient. I only caught pieces. Hawthorne file. Clean summary. Key log. Listing history. Tenant payments? Yes. Today. When she came back, she didn't sit down like she planned to linger. She sat down like she planned to move. You're not going back to that shelter, she said. My pride tried to stand up and argue. My exhaustion shoved it back down. Okay, I whispered, which was the most honest word I'd said all day. An hour later, Lila was bouncing on a hotel bed like it was a trampoline, and the world had never been cruel. She found the little complimentary soap, sniffed it dramatically, and announced it smelled like a fancy grandma. Evelyn stood by the window, phone in hand, watching traffic like she was watching a battlefield. She didn't tell me everything. She didn't have to. The point wasn't details yet. The point was that something was happening. Something I didn't have to carry alone. That night, after Lila fell asleep in clean sheets with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Evelyn sat at the small table by the window and finally spoke again. Your parents are hosting an event, she said. Important to them. A venue, relatives, speeches, the whole performance. My stomach tightened. When? Evelyn's gaze stayed on the city lights. Soon, she said. And we'll be there. She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a decision already made. 3 days later, I stood in the hotel bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a version of me that had been put through a washer cycle and hung up to dry in a storm. Evelyn had insisted I buy a dress. Not an expensive one. Just a clean one. A simple one. You don't need armor, she'd said. You need dignity. I wasn't sure dignity came in polyester, but I appreciated the sentiment. Lila wore a little blue dress and tights. She twirled once in the hotel room and said, I look like a princess. You do, I said, and my throat tightened. On the ride over, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might vomit. What if I freeze? I asked quietly. Evelyn didn't look at me. Then I'll speak. What if they deny everything? They will, Evelyn said. What if everyone thinks I'm... I stopped, because I didn't even have a word for it. Evelyn glanced at me then, her gaze sharp but steady. Maya, she said, you've survived worse than a room full of liars. The car pulled up outside a venue I'd never have picked in my life. One of those hotel event spaces with soft lighting and hard smiles. The sign by the entrance read, Hart Collins Family Dinner. Of course it did. My mother loved an event. Not because she liked people, because she liked witnesses. Inside, there were relatives I hadn't seen in months. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people with opinions and casseroles. Except the casseroles had been replaced by catered hors d'oeuvres served on trays like tiny edible bribes. At the far end of the room, there was a projector screen set up and a microphone. Because my mother couldn't serve dinner without also serving a narrative. Before we went in, Evelyn stopped at a side door and spoke briefly to a staff member. A woman nodded and opened a small private room next to the banquet hall. Quiet, warm, stocked with water bottles and crackers. This is for Lila, Evelyn said. She doesn't need to be in the center of this. Lila took one cautious step into the room, then looked up at Evelyn seriously. Do I get snacks? Yes, Evelyn said. Good ones. Lila accepted that like it was legally binding. A trusted assistant stayed with her. Lila waved at me, completely unaware she was being protected from the family apocalypse. Then Evelyn looked at me. You go in first, she said. I knew what she was doing. Let them see me before they saw her. Let them panic in silence. I walked into the banquet room alone. The chatter softened, then resumed, the way people do when they sense something but don't want to be the first to acknowledge it. Then Diane saw me. Her smile appeared automatically, then glitched, like a bad Wi-Fi connection. Her eyes flicked over my dress, my posture, the fact that I wasn't wearing I'm drowning on my face anymore. Her hands tightened slightly around her wine glass. Robert noticed a second later. His laugh died halfway through. His jaw clenched like he was biting down on a thought. Neither of them moved toward me. They didn't ask where I'd been. They didn't ask how Lila was. They did what people do when they're trying to calculate danger. They smiled and waited. I stood near the edge of the room and let the silence do its work. Dry humor is sometimes the only thing that keeps you from screaming, so I let myself have one thought. Look at us. A family dinner. The kind where everyone pretends the most important thing is the seating arrangement. A minute later, the room temperature changed. Evelyn Hart entered, calm, unhurried, completely in control. Beside her was a man with a slim folder and a laptop bag, the kind of person who looked like he'd never raised his voice in his life because he didn't need to. Diane went pale. Not, oh, you surprised me, pale. More like, I just realized my entire plan has a hole in it, pale. Robert straightened his shoulders, the way he did when he wanted to look like the victim before anyone had accused him of anything. Evelyn nodded to a few relatives like she was simply attending dinner. Then she looked at my mother. "Diane," Evelyn said lightly, "before we eat, I'd like to clear up something you told me." My mother's smile tightened. "Of course, Mom." Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "You told me Maya was living in the house on Hawthorne Street," she said. The room quieted, not because everyone suddenly cared about Hawthorne Street, but because everyone suddenly cared about Diane's face. Diane's eyes darted. She set her glass down as if it had become heavy. "Well," she said, laughing too fast. "Yes, she—" Evelyn held up a hand. "Let's not do this with guessing," Evelyn said. "Let's do it with facts." She nodded to the man with the laptop. He stepped forward and plugged into the venue's projector like he'd done it 1,000 times. The first slide appeared, Hawthorne Street. Summary. A murmur ran through the room. Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Evelyn didn't speak like she was giving a courtroom speech. She spoke like she was reading the weather. "This house was arranged for Maya and Lila," she said, and the screen showed a simple line to match. Next slide. "Keys released to Diane Hart Collins. July." Evelyn let that sit for half a second. Then another slide. A listing screenshot. The Hawthorne house marketed as a furnished rental. Photos of the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. People leaned forward. Diane's hands started to shake. Next, a lease summary. Names blurred, dates visible. Tenants moved in, August. And then the slide that made the room go dead quiet. A payment instruction page from the property manager file. Rent payout account, provided by Diane and Robert. Evelyn's voice didn't rise. "Diane," she said, "you didn't just take the keys." She looked around the room, making sure everyone heard. "You rented out the home meant for my granddaughter and my great-granddaughter, and you had the rent sent to an account you controlled." Robert snapped first, loud, trying to take back the room. "This is inappropriate," he barked. "This is a family event." Evelyn turned her gaze to him. "Yes," she said. "That's why I'm doing it here." Diane found her voice, thin and frantic. "We were going to tell her," she said quickly. "It was temporary. We needed—" "Temporary," Evelyn repeated. Her eyes flicked toward the side room where Lila was, unseen but present. "You displaced a child," Evelyn said, and the room went still. She paused, just long enough, then finished the sentence. "For profit," someone gasped. Someone whispered, "You've got to be kidding." Diane started crying, real tears this time. "We had debts," she sobbed. "You don't understand." Evelyn's expression didn't change. "I understand enough," she said. "And I'm done funding your choices." She turned slightly so everyone could hear and said simply, "Starting now, Diane and Robert receive nothing from me. No more help. No more transfers. No inheritance." Robert's face twisted. "You can't—" "I can," Evelyn said. "And I already did." The man with the folder stepped forward, calm. "Diane Collins, Robert Collins," he said politely. "These documents are for you." A uniformed officer stood nearby, not dramatic, not aggressive, just present, because Evelyn didn't gamble with scenes like this. Diane stared at the papers like they were radioactive. Robert took them with shaking hands, then looked around the room and finally understood the worst part. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a reputation collapsing in public. Evelyn's voice stayed level. "You will not contact Maya," she said. "You will cooperate, and you will answer for what you did." Diane turned to me then, eyes wild. "Maya," she begged, "tell her to stop. We're family." Something inside me went cold and clear. You should have remembered that, I said quietly, before you made a business out of my daughter's home. Diane's face crumpled. I didn't feel joy exactly. I felt relief. Relief that the truth was finally out loud. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Relief that Lila would never have to learn how to smile through humiliation the way I had. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I walked out of the banquet room, down the hallway, and opened the door to the private room. Lila looked up, cheeks full of crackers. Mom, are we done? I crouched and hugged her so tight she squeaked. Yeah, I whispered. We're done. She leaned back and looked at my face carefully, like she was checking for storms. Then she asked softly, Can we go home? I swallowed hard. Yes, I said. We can. Evelyn met us in the hallway. She didn't look back at the room. She didn't need to. In the car, Lila leaned against my shoulder and fell asleep. I stared out the window, hands trembling. Grandma, I whispered. What happens now? Evelyn didn't take her eyes off the road. Now, she said, we take back what was meant for you. 6 months later, our life is boring in the best way. We live on Hawthorne Street now. Lila has her own room, her own curtains, and a crooked art gallery of drawings taped to the wall. She walks to school like the world has always been safe. That's the point. I'm still a nursing assistant. By choice, not because I'm stuck. I'm finishing my RN track one step at a time, and for the first time, my energy goes into the future instead of survival. Evelyn never paid for my life. She showed up when it mattered most, and she made sure no one could ever intercept help again. Sunday mornings, she visits with pastries and pretends she's only here to see Lila. Lila doesn't buy it. Grandma Evelyn, she'll ask, do you like our house? Evelyn always pauses like she's swallowing something heavy. Then she says, yes, I do. As for Diane and Robert, turns out you can't rent out someone else's home, collect the money, and keep calling it family. The rent they took didn't stay free. They were forced to repay it, and the investigation that followed made their respectable image evaporate. Once Evelyn cut them off, their hidden debts showed up like roaches under a flipped light switch. People stopped inviting them. Calls stopped getting answered. My mother tried to contact me, not to apologize, to negotiate. I blocked the number because I'm done bargaining for basic decency. So what do you think? Did Evelyn do the right thing, or did she go too far? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. My 8-year-old daughter needed life-saving surgery. I asked her rich father for money. Right in front of her, he said, "You should have aborted. You get nothing from me." I didn't cry. I did this. Now my daughter is happy and healthy, and my ex's life fell apart. I stood on the front steps of an expensive private club, holding Maddie's hand so tight it felt like tomorrow depended on the strength of my fingers. Inside, music played, laughter, clinking glasses, someone's congratulations, everything people use to celebrate other people's good fortune. That night, they were sending his father off into retirement. A big event, big guests, big money, and, as it turned out, a very small conscience. I shouldn't have been there. Normal people don't show up at someone else's party uninvited. Normal people don't drag a child up to the entrance of a closed event while holding a folder of medical records in the other hand. Normal people try not to end up in situations where the word life-saving is literal. But we hadn't had a normal life in a long time. The hostess looked me over like I'd brought a mess into their picture-perfect scene. "This is a private event," she said gently, with the kind of tone that means, "You don't belong here." "I know," I said. "I need Brandon Caldwell. 1 minute." She didn't move. "Without an invitation, we can't." I nodded. I understood. I had learned that language already. The language of doors closing in your face. The language of smiles that mean nothing. The language of people who have options and who love reminding you when you don't. Maddie stood beside me, quiet. An 8-year-old with big eyes and that too adult habit of staying silent when the truth makes grown-ups uncomfortable. "Mom," she whispered. "It's okay," I said automatically. I hate that sentence. It means nothing. It's just noise parents make when they can't say the truth. The hostess disappeared, then came back a minute later, now visibly annoyed. "He's busy, and you don't have an invitation." I almost turned around. Almost. Then Maddie leaned into me, just a little, and I felt her fingers trembling. Not a tantrum, not tears, just a small shake, like a bird in your hands. Something inside me clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just like a switch. "Tell him one thing," I said calmly. "There's a woman here, and she says the little girl next to her is his daughter." The hostess blinked, then blinked again. For a second, her face turned human. "Wait here." She vanished. We stayed on the steps. I watched the glass doors and tried not to think about how people behind them were eating steak and laughing while my mind kept looping one word: surgery. A couple minutes later, the doors opened, and he walked out. Brandon looked the same, handsome, confident, loosely relaxed, like a man who's spent his whole life watching problems get solved with money or someone else's phone call. He wore an expensive suit that fit like it had been borne on his shoulders, a cigar in his hand. Yes, a cigar, because when you're rich, you can cosplay as a character from an old movie in the 21st century. He stopped when he saw us, and for a second he looked thrown. That second was enough for me to see it on his face. He understood. He didn't need a test. He didn't need my story. It felt like he needed one detail. Maddie's face, her brows, her chin, the exact expression she makes when she frowns, the one he makes too. He looked at her like someone had just handed him a bill for a dinner he didn't order. "You," he breathed, then flicked his eyes to me. "So you really had it." The words landed almost casually, like we weren't talking about a child but a package I'd picked up without a delivery slip. Maddie squeezed my hand harder. I swallowed. "She's your daughter, Brandon. She's 8. He gave a short, tight laugh. 8, he repeated, like he was tasting the number. "So what now? You need money?" Just like that. No how are you, no why, no what do you need. Straight to the point. "Money." I nodded. "Yes." "How much?" he asked, like we were negotiating over a used car. I opened the folder, not dramatically, not shaking, just opened it and showed him the first page. Black ink on white paper. Numbers. Deadlines. Diagnosis. His eyes slid over it, and the boredom arrived instantly. "Listen," he said, exhaling smoke away from us. "What are your claims here? You decided to keep it. I offered you another option. And by the way, I helped back then. So fair is fair. There's nothing you get from me." That's when I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was screaming. Fair is fair. He said it like fairness was a clause in a contract his father once signed on his behalf. "I didn't come here to debate fairness," I said. "I came for a chance for her." Maddie stood beside me, looking up at him. No excitement, no hope. Just watching. Like kids do when adults are doing something important and the kid doesn't know yet whether they'll ever be able to unsee it. "She needs surgery," I went on. "Urgently. Otherwise," I didn't say, "otherwise she'll die." Not because I was scared of the truth, because you don't put that word next to a child when it's about the child. It's like striking glass. He tipped his head. "Surgery." He drew it out. "So she's sick too?" He sounded almost relieved, as if the universe had handed him an excuse not to feel like a monster. And then, right there on the steps, 2 feet from my daughter, he said it. Calmly, clearly, without anger, like a fact. "You should have aborted. You get nothing from me." I felt Maddie flinch. The words were English, but the cruelty didn't need translating. Kids understand cruelty faster than grammar. I didn't cry, not because I'm strong, because I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Not then. Not in front of her. I closed the folder slowly. "Got it," I said. He was already turning away, like he'd checked off a task. Denied. But I still added, quietly, level, no threats. "I didn't come here for a war, Brandon. But if you think you can just disappear, I'll do it officially. Through the court. Paternity. Child support. Everything the way it works in this country. Not because I want a payoff. Because Maddie has a right." He stopped, shot me an irritated look. "Gold diggers," he muttered, slipping into a familiar role. "I've seen dozens of you." Then he looked at Maddie and gave a little smirk, like an idea had amused him. "You know," he said almost cheerfully, "when I have a kid with the woman I love, then I'll help. But this one?" He waved a hand like he was dismissing a delivery he hadn't ordered. "I don't know." And he walked back inside, to the congratulations and the photos, to the place where everything in his life was still fine. We stayed on the steps. Maddie was quiet. Then she tilted her face up and asked softly, "Mom, is he really my dad?" I looked at her and answered just as softly. "Biologically, yes. But a dad is the one who stays." She nodded, like she already knew. We walked to the car. I held her hand and didn't look back once. I didn't cry. I did what mothers do when someone takes their air away. I turned pain into a to-do list. To understand why I even knew where to find Brandon, and why my child ended up standing on the steps of someone else's party, you have to go back to where it started. I moved to Columbus not because I dreamed of a big city. I moved because I had to go somewhere. My grandmother raised me, not helped, not watched me sometimes. Raised, like you raise a tree in wind, propping it up, tying it off, sometimes cursing the weather. My parents weren't really in the picture. Grandma was everything. Home, discipline, first aid kit, and the one person who could say, "You'll make it," in a way that sounded like truth. I studied nursing and worked whatever I could. Night shifts, weekends, other people's demands, other people's blood, other people's pain. Strangely, all of that felt easier than dealing with my own life. I didn't like clubs, noise, crowds, strangers' bodies too close. I was the kind of girl friends dragged out saying, "You need to loosen up," and then acted surprised when you stood against the wall counting minutes to escape. That night, I was standing against the wall, and then he came over. Brandon was one of those men who looks like an advertisement: teeth, watch, confidence. He smiled like we already knew each other and were just deciding where to continue the evening. "You here alone?" he asked. I said yes and instantly felt stupid because every word near him sounded like I was taking a test I hadn't studied for. He suggested stepping outside for air, then a drive through the city at night. I agreed, not because I was easy, because he looked at me like no didn't exist in his world. We drove through the night streets and everything felt like a movie. Lights, music in the car, his hand on the wheel. He talked about himself easily and loudly, school, trips, how everything's handled. I remember saying something like, "You live so confidently," and he laughed. "Why wouldn't I? My dad..." And then he named a position the way some people say a password to every locked door. His father was a big name in the state's highway enforcement world. Not just a cop. One of the guys at the top, someone who decided what happened to who. Brandon said it with the kind of pride some people use when they say, "I built it all myself." Only he hadn't built anything. He'd simply been born into the right family. "If anything happens, they'll always get me out," he said. "You have no idea." I did have an idea, and for some reason, it made me cold. He turned off the highway onto a quiet road outside the city. Fields, darkness, scattered lights. The kind of place where nobody asks questions because nobody sees. "It's beautiful out here," he said, and turned off the music. It was beautiful, in that wide, empty American way. Huge sky, earth smell, silence that presses against your ears. And that's where it happened. I'm not going to dress it up. It wasn't romantic. It was picast. Certain. On his terms. And the weirdest part was afterward he looked at me and genuinely seemed surprised. "You serious?" he asked. "What? I'm your first?" I nodded and immediately regretted it. I wanted to rewind time and lie, not from shame, from self-defense. He smirked. "Never had that," he said, like someone had handed him a rare toy. Then he drove me home, took my number to be polite. I knew what it meant, but somewhere inside me, an idiotic little hope still lived. Maybe. We met up twice more, and those dates were a strange mix. He was warm exactly as long as he was interested. I looked at him the way you look at someone who suddenly feels like the meaning of things. And then he got bored. You can feel it. When someone's still there, but they're already somewhere else. When replies get shorter. When your messages get read but not answered. And one day he just disappeared. I called him. At first carefully, then more. Then with that anxious feeling where you don't want to sound desperate but panic is already living in your chest. "You okay?" I texted. "Everything all right?" Ringing. 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 Once I called, and a woman answered. "The Caldwell residence," she said calmly. "Residence. Not hello. Residence." I froze. I'm looking for Brandon." "He's gone," she said, like she was stating the weather. "Through the end of summer, language program, the Caribbean." The Caribbean. While I was counting money for gas and wondering whether I could afford better medication for my grandmother, Brandon was improving his language skills on an island. Because his father wanted to slot him into some cushy future, and the son had to look the part. I hung up and sat down on my hallway floor. Not pretty, not dramatic, just sat, like my legs had stopped holding me. I cried for a week, quietly, into a pillow, so Grandma wouldn't hear, because Grandma was already living at the edge of her strength. She would have understood, but I didn't want her to hurt for me. Then I pulled myself together. Stuff happens. Forget it. Move on. And I almost believed it. And then one morning I realized I hadn't had a normal one morning in a while. I had a late period. I tried to tell myself it was stress. I'm a medical person. I know things happen. I can rationalize. It's my talent. Explaining to myself what I don't want to admit. The test showed 2 lines. I stared at them and felt something roll over me. Not joy. Not horror. Something in between. And my first thought was absolutely stupid. This is a reason to see him again. Do you understand? I was so naive I treated pregnancy like a chance to talk. I waited for fall because they told me he'll be back at the end of summer. He came back. Just not to me. I called his number. He didn't pick up right away. When he did, he recognized me, and I think he was even a little pleased. He liked knowing someone remembered him. I told him I was pregnant. Silence. Then he said we should meet. A coffee shop near his campus, where he was studying to be a future lawyer, as his father loved to brag. I prepared for that meeting like a final exam. put on a dress that still fit, for now, light makeup. I arrived 30 minutes early and stared at the door like he might walk in and say something right. Brandon was late. He sat down and went straight to business. "Sorry this happened," he started. He could say sorry in a way that cost nothing, like an ATM, insert card, receive phrase. "I really hate that you're dealing with this," he continued, looking past me. "But how far along?" 11 weeks, I said. He nodded like I'd said 8 minutes. "We can still terminate," he said. I didn't even register the meaning immediately. "What?" "Don't drag it out," he said, already certain. "There are private Anderson clinics. They'll do it fast. Don't worry about the cost. I'll take you right now." I sat there and couldn't believe it. Over the summer, I'd gotten used to the idea that I was going to be a mother. I'd already started loving the tiny being inside me. I'd told Grandma. Grandma went quiet at first. Then she fussed and cried and took her heart drops. She wanted a different life for me. Yes. She dreamed I'd be happy in the normal way. But she didn't say, "Get rid of it." She said, "If it happened, we'll manage. Just don't count on him, honey." Back then, I still did. "I'm not doing that," I told Brandon. He didn't even get angry. He just got tired. Like I'd made his life more complicated. "Listen," he said, leaning forward. "You're choosing this, but I'm not participating." "It's your child," I whispered. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and put it on the table. "That's enough for the procedure," he said. "I did my part. From here on out, it's your responsibility." I stared at the envelope and felt sick. Not from pregnancy, from humiliation. I don't remember if I grabbed it right then or walked out and left it on the table. My head was static. I only remember one thing. When I stepped outside, the air was cold, and for the first time I was truly scared. Not for me, for the baby. Maddie was born in a regular city hospital. No VIP suite, no photographer and balloons. Just me, my grandmother, and a very tired doctor who'd seen hundreds of women like me. She was beautiful, tiny. And when they placed her on my chest, for the first time in a long time, I felt like something in the world was right. And then the doctor said words that knock the ground out from under even people who work in medicine. "Your baby has a congenital heart defect. It didn't require surgery right away. Right away. That phrase is just a delayed alarm. Otherwise, Maddie was healthy, warm. She smelled like milk." She grabbed my finger so hard it was like she was holding on to life and had no intention of letting go. My grandmother and I adored her. Money got funny, in the worst way. I couldn't work. The benefits were tiny. We counted everything, from diapers to gas. Grandma cut back on herself so much it made me angry. She could have bought decent groceries, but she bought Maddie a toy. And you know what's strange? Even in those months, I never seriously thought about going to Brandon. Not because I was proud, because I could hear his voice in my head. "You chose this. It's your responsibility." And somewhere in me that toxic logic lived. If I decided to give birth, then I had no right to ask. Now that I'm older, I want to go back and slap my younger self. Not out of anger, out of pity, because it wasn't pride. It was being cornered. Maddie grew up not like a typical kid. She grew up like a little question mark. By 4, she was reading. By 5, she was doing math meant for second or third graders. She asked a million questions. Why blood is red, why planes don't fall, why people have different voices, why the heart beats like that. Sometimes I looked at her and thought, "God, please let you always stay this alive." And sometimes, at night, when Maddie slept, I sat at the kitchen table and Googled her diagnosis, and it felt like I'd stopped breathing too. When Maddie started daycare, I could go back to work. I took nursing shifts nobody wanted. Grandma picked Maddie up, fed her, read books to her, taught her chess. Yes, chess. Maddie liked thinking. Life slowly started to settle. We even allowed ourselves small joys. Pizza on Fridays, a trip to the park, ice cream just because. And we almost believed that right away would stretch into years. But right away ended when Maddie turned 8. First, she tired faster. Then she complained more often about chest pain. Then one day, she just sat down on the school hallway floor and told her teacher she couldn't breathe right. I picked her up and drove straight to the doctor. The doctor looked at the results, then at me and said, "She needs surgery, soon." He named the cost. Even with insurance, even with payment plans, even with us doing everything right, it was money I'd never had in my life, and never could. I went pale. Not metaphorically. Actually, because in moments like that, your brain does one thing. It starts calculating what you can sell. A house? We didn't have one. A car? A drop in the ocean? A loan? Nobody would give me that kind of loan, and there wasn't time anyway. The doctor saw my face and added, "The hospital has assistance programs, charity care, fund support, community fundraising. A social worker will talk with you. We help families in these situations." I nodded, holding back tears, on autopilot. Then he said, "But sometimes fundraising takes months. And in your case, the sooner, the better." When we walked out, Maddie stayed brave. She asked, "Mom, are they going to cut me?" "They're going to fix you," I said. "And you're going to run faster than anyone." She tried to smile. It came out crooked. At home, I sat at the kitchen table and understood one thing. I needed a huge amount of money. Now. And I knew exactly who had it. Brandon. I didn't stalk him. I truly tried to live like he didn't exist. But Brandon was the kind of person you couldn't fully avoid. He was a local mini-celebrity. Parties, expensive cars, projects, photos by pools with drinks and headphones. The life is great grin. Even in his 30s, he had that habit of looking like a 20-year-old who thinks rules are for other people. He had everything that was fantasy to me. Multiple properties, a parent's house with a pool, money spent because it felt like it. And I had a little girl who might not live to the next school year. I opened a local news site and saw a headline. His father was retiring. Big reception, closed event, elite place, a perfect chance to speak. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'd do it again. That's how we ended up on those steps. I brought the diagnosis. I brought the numbers. I brought my child. I brought truth into a place that was built to live without it. And Brandon brought a cigar, confidence, and that abortion line. After his words, I wanted to curl up in the passenger seat and disappear. I wanted to cry until there was no air left. I wanted to... a lot of things. But Maddie was sitting right there. And I knew, if I fell apart, she wouldn't just remember the hospital and the surgery. She'd remember me, broken. So I did what I do best. I turned emotion into action. The next day, I met with the hospital social worker. We filled out the forms, we filed applications. We did what people do when they don't have rich parents, and they don't have a call from the top. At the same time, I launched a fundraiser. Yes, that one. On the platform everyone in America knows. I wrote our story the best I could. No hysteria, no theater, just facts. An 8-year-old girl, a heart, a surgery, a timeline. I didn't write Brandon's name. I didn't need to. People in our city knew who he was. And when someone recognizes themselves between the lines, it's usually louder than any direct accusation. Money started coming in slowly, then faster still. Sometimes strangers wrote, "We're not rich, but we're with you." Sometimes someone donated $5 and a heart emoji. Sometimes someone dropped 1,000 with no comment. Sometimes people brought food to my grandmother because you don't have time to think about groceries right now. Here's what's wild. Strangers were kinder than her own father. And a few days later, I finally went where I should have gone from the beginning, to legal aid. Not because I dreamed of court. I hate court. I hate paper wars. But I hate even more when someone thinks they can abandon a child and go right on living like nothing happened. The attorney looked at my documents and said what I already knew, but somehow hadn't let myself claim. In this country, a child has a right to support from both parents. Whether you want that or not, this isn't a favor. It's an obligation. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. We filed for paternity. Officially. Through the court. Not by words. Not by fairness. By law. Brandon tried to do what he does best. Vanish and hope the problem goes away. It didn't. He got served. He got calls. He got found. Because no matter how fun the party life is, you still leave traces. Addresses, paperwork, bills. I didn't celebrate it. I just did it. Because his voice was still in my head. You get nothing from me. Fine. Then I won't take it from you. I'll take, for Maddie, what she's owed. Maddie's surgery happened in time. The money came together. Assistants came through. People came through. The hospital came through. Brandon didn't. But you know what? In that moment, I didn't care who exactly saved my daughter. I cared about one thing, her heart. After surgery, Maddie became a different kid. Not in personality, in oxygen. She started running, laughing louder, asking for one more lap on the carousel. One day she simply said, "Mom, I'm not scared to breathe anymore." I went into the bathroom, shut the door, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Quietly. Quickly. Then I washed my face because shift, school, life. We started living again. Maddie kept outpacing other kids. I was proud of her in a way that felt like pride had become an organ. She won competitions. Local, statewide, then bigger ones. School came easy. She absorbed information like a sponge, and then asked questions that sent me to Google because I couldn't always keep up with my own child. In 5th grade, she got into programming. Imagine it. A kid who just stopped being afraid to breathe sits down and starts writing code because she wants to know how things work. By the time she finished high school, she was earning more than I ever had as a nurse. Not because kids these days, because Maddie was obsessed with her work, in the good way. She'd stay up all night building something because she wanted it right. In college, she and 2 friends started a tiny tech company, small, scrappy, laptops on their knees, vending machine coffee, big ideas. Then it stopped being scrappy. Then investors showed up. Then articles. Then interviews. Then Maddie started getting recognized. Sometimes I'd turn on the TV and see my daughter in a segment about young entrepreneurs, and my brain couldn't process that this was the same girl who once whispered, "Are they going to cut me?" By 30, she was a millionaire. I couldn't keep up with how fast it happened. To me, she was still Maddie, the girl with a book and that stubborn habit of finishing what she started. I didn't understand half of what she did, honestly, but I understood the important part. She did it with fire in her eyes, and it worked. Grandma got to see it. She got very old, very small, but her mind stayed sharp. Sometimes she'd sit in her chair, watch Maddie on the news, and quietly say, "That's what I held on for." And every time my chest tightened, because Grandma, unlike Brandon, never acted like this isn't my responsibility. She just stayed. When Maddie was 10, I met David. At work. Of course. Everything important in my life seemed to happen either in the hospital or around it. David tried to court me like a normal human being, but I didn't trust men back then. Brandon lived inside me like a vaccine. Charming smile, empty promises, then disappearance. It took David a long time to melt my ice. He didn't push. He didn't play games. He was just there. He did what adults do. He proved with actions that he could be trusted. We got married. We had Ava. And the most important thing, David never treated Ava and Maddie differently. He played chess with Maddie, talked to her, not like a kid, but like a person, backed her ideas, laughed at her jokes, listened when she explained how some new program worked, even though he, like me, didn't always understand. Sometimes I felt like I gave Maddie more attention, not because I loved Ava less, but because Maddie always carried that feeling in me. I owe her. I owed her for those steps, for that refusal, for that line about abortion. David said to me once, "You don't owe her anything. You've already done everything." And that might have been the strongest support I've ever heard. When Maddie grew up, she said more than once, "David taught me that normal men exist." And every time I thought, there, that's what family is. Not blood, not last names, not fairness. Choice. I tried not to think about Brandon. Most of what I learned about Brandon after that came in fragments, local news, public records, and years later, what the journalist told Maddie. I knew he was out there somewhere, living, partying, smiling for cameras. Sometimes his photos popped up because the internet loves handing you memories you never asked for, but time sorts things out. His father retired. The flow of help slowed. Brandon sulked. Not because he suddenly learned the value of work, no, because money stopped being as effortless. His father, now retired, tried his hand at business. For a while it seemed to work. Then, heart attack. And Brandon was left with a mother who'd never worked, who'd gotten used to a life where things just happen. From what I heard, when his father died, the department Brandon had been placed into didn't keep him long. They'd kept him out of respect for the old boss. When the respect left with the boss, Brandon left too. Slowly, he and his mother sold off property. There was a lot, enough to keep the pretty life going for years after that. Brandon even managed to get married and have a daughter in that time. His wife didn't stay long. No future. A marriage to a lazy, frivolous man who only knew how to take wasn't romance. It was quicksand. She left. Made him promise, at least that's how it was told to me, he'd never bother them again. And you know what's the most stunning part? And from what I could tell, Brandon was happy to keep that promise. Probably the only promise he ever kept. Then they had to sell the big house, move to an apartment, then a smaller, cheaper place. Then his mother died. And Brandon was alone, in a tiny one-bedroom, with disability checks, because one day he drove drunk and crashed. Serious injuries. According to the journalist, he later called it his lucky ticket. Otherwise, he'd have nothing to live on. According to the journalist, he had friends. Dozens. They were around as long as he had money for booze. Then they vanished. Then they came back when money showed up again. Brandon lived with a permanent grudge against the world. In his universe, everyone was at fault. Women who demand, parents who didn't give enough, kids who were turned against him, a world that didn't appreciate him. Just not him. His own daughter, the one from his marriage, wanted nothing to do with him. He said she'd been brainwashed. Of course, someone always brainwashes. It's never possible that a person simply remembers who you are. So there was one thing left. Alcohol. I didn't find out a journalist had tracked Brandon down until Maddie told me. This is how Maddie told it to me, mostly through what the journalist told her. Once Maddie became known, people wrote about her constantly. Interviews, articles, podcasts. And one day, some journalist decided Maddie deserved a book. Inspirational. For teenagers. About starting from nothing and making it. He dug into family history. Realized David wasn't her biological father. And of course, he wanted to find the real one. He found Brandon. When he showed up, the journalist said Brandon was a sad picture. A man drinking himself into nothing, unemployed, surviving on small disability payments. The journalist started asking questions. Brandon tried to spin it. I have a daughter, but we don't talk. The journalist kept talking about a child, not saying the name. Brandon, of course, had heard about the young tech millionaire, even envied her. But he didn't connect it. And then it clicked. Maddie was that little girl, the one I'd begged money for, the one he'd told to abort. She survived. And she became a millionaire. Brandon grabbed his head. Even in his decline, he understood. After everything, Maddie wasn't exactly going to run into his arms. But in his mind, a different machine started up. Not regret, not guilt, profit. She could solve all my problems. It wouldn't cost her anything. He started talking about lawyers, about laws, about how adult kids have to support their parents. The fantasies of a man who'd spent his entire life thinking the world owed him. The journalist looked at him and said something close to what I told Maddie on the steps years ago, just with different words. If I were her, I wouldn't even want to know you exist. Brandon asked, tired. Then what do you want from me? The journalist answered honestly, I'm writing a book. I always try to understand the people in the story. Maybe your example will help someone make the right choice. And then he added, like the final nail, this story is a ready-made parable. The moral is simple. You don't abandon your children. The journalist left. According to the journalist, Brandon stayed at the table. It hurt him. And the funniest part, if anything in this is funny, wasn't because he suddenly understood how much pain he caused. It was because he realized how much money he'd lost. He pulled a half-finished bottle from the cabinet and drank straight from it. When Maddie told me, I stayed quiet for a long time. Not because I felt sorry for him, because I felt this strange calm. Life doesn't always punish in a neat cinematic way. Sometimes it punishes slowly, with empty rooms, with money bleeding out, with people leaving because you made leaving the only option. Maddie was right there, alive, healthy, strong. And I told her what I should have told her a long time ago, and myself too. You don't owe anyone anything, especially the person who chose nothing. She smiled. I know, Mom. And that, I think, is the best ending. Not his downfall, her life. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please subscribe and give this video a like. And if you feel comfortable, share your thoughts in the comments. I read them. Your support truly means a lot. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.